This is KGW TV, Channel 8, Portland.
Now, your news specialists, Ann Curry and Dave Sullivan with sports. This is the News 8 Weekend Report.
Good evening. A young Washington County girl is missing tonight in the cold and the rain. She is the daughter of a university professor, and she vanished early yesterday. Tim Storrs has more in this late report.
It is a disappearance as frightening to police as it is to the parents of the missing teenager. 15-year-old Marty Stockhouse left her home in Cornelius at noon Friday. Though hobbled by a cast on her right leg, she intended to walk the 6 blocks to the Fred Meyer store. She was not gone long before someone went to look for her.
The mother came home about 12:30, asked where she was at, and her sister said she'd gone to the store.
I went over to get her, and I looked through Fred Meyer, and I looked through Hank's, and I didn't see her either place.
So that was about a half an hour to 40 minutes after she would have left here.
Marty lived at home with 2 sisters and a brother. Her mother, Diane, is an engineering technician at Intel. Her father, Rob, chairman of the biology department at Pacific University. What worries them most is the last phone call a friend received from Marty about 11:30 last night.
It was a very short conversation. She seemed to only be able to talk and answer questions that had a yes or a no answer, and she seemed to be under duress.
From the communication, what could she tell you?
Only that she was okay. She was with people that she didn't know, and she didn't know where she was.
It is a situation all too hauntingly familiar for a small town in Washington County.
We just don't want another incident like the Ulrich girl. That's all that we're concerned.
In Cornelius, Tim Storrs, News 8.
In Seattle, 18 women are now believed to be the victims of a single psychologically disturbed killer. 5 of the women were found strangled, their bodies dumped along the Green River south of Seattle. They were housewives and schoolgirls between the ages of 16 and 31. 7 of the women were found elsewhere, all linked to prostitution. And 6 of the women have not been found. They are missing from the South Seattle area. The number of suspects has been narrowed from 300 to 3, but investigators say they are hampered by the lack of witnesses. A lot of people witnessed a standoff between a sniper and police today. It happened near Disneyland in Anaheim, California. The sniper started firing a rifle from the window of his hotel room, and when he refused to surrender, police evacuated about 100 guests from 3 motels in the area. After 10 hours, the gunman finally turned himself in. Feminist leader Ginny Foat's husband is sticking to his story. Under cross-examination today, he maintained she helped him commit murder 18 years ago. Robert Elliott has details.
According to John Sidoti, Ginny Foat not only helped in the 1965 murder of the Argentine businessman, but she ordered it. Under direct examination, Sidoti said that when the robbery went afoul, he heard Foat scream, "He knows who I am. You'll have to kill him." During Sidoti's cross-examination, Foat's attorneys repeatedly questioned his motive for testifying and attempted to tear down his credibility as a witness. The defense began by pointing out that in return for his testimony against Foat, Sidoti won't be prosecuted for the murder himself. Foat's attorneys worked hard to make sure the jury understood these plea bargain conditions and how they might alter the truth. The defense also suggested that revenge was a possible motive for Sidoti's testimony. Sidoti admitted that in 1970 he threatened to kill Foat if she walked out on their marriage. Other motivation? Money. Sidoti told the court that several magazines are interested in his Foat story, including Penthouse, which recently paid him $3,000. At the conclusion of cross-examination, defense attorneys asked Sidoti to look Ginny Foat in the eye and tell her that she helped in the 1965 tire iron murder. Sidoti refused, saying, "I don't want to be here. It's just what I have to do." Robert Elliott, NBC News, Gretna, Louisiana.
In Texas, investigators are still puzzling over today's Amtrak trail derailment. 5 cars overturned for some reason, killing at least 4 people and hospitalizing at least 24 others. Tonight, rescue crews used heavy cranes to lift the overturned cars, but they didn't find any more bodies. Tonight, prisoners are booked in the Justice Center jail for the first time. They are in a jail without bars and with a great view from downtown Portland. In the next several days, more prisoners will be bussed in from Rocky Butte and Claire Argo. The president looks at North Korea through binoculars, and in the Middle East, a report that the U.S. has lost 2 fighter planes. Details coming up. The federal government has money to spend tonight. Congress today, approved a multi-billion-dollar stopgap spending bill. The emergency legislation was needed to keep bankrupt federal agencies operating through next September. The bill is being flown to Korea tonight, where President Reagan is expected to sign it. With a white flag flying from his armored car, President Reagan was driven into the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea late today. He talked with American soldiers and said, quote, "I have never been as proud as I am now." He praised the infantrymen for facing a heavily armed, quote, "unpredictable enemy who has no regard for human life." The president spent 43 minutes inside the DMZ. At one point, he stood behind sandbags and looked at North Korea through binoculars. Earlier in the day, he made several other stops in North Korea. Chris Wallace was with him.
The president made his purpose clear from the moment he arrived in Seoul and greeted President Chun to reaffirm the U.S. military commitment here. Security was extraordinary. The North Koreans had threatened Mr. Reagan's life if he came, and so 100,000 security agents were put on alert. But the drive from the airport was without incident, as hundreds of thousands of Koreans lined the streets. Speaking to the National Assembly, the president noted Korea's recent tragedies. He called for a moment of silence for the victims of the Korean airliner attack.
Please join me in this tribute, in which the spirit of our two peoples will be as one.
And he condemned the North Korean bombing last month that killed 17 South Korean officials.
Let every aggressor hear our words, because Americans and Koreans speak with one voice. People who are free will not be slaves, and freedom will not be lost in the Republic of Korea.
The president compared the two Koreas, saying the North arms and attacks while the South prospers.
Let the world look long and hard at both sides of the 38th parallel and then ask which side enjoys a better life.
One Korean watching the speech was Reverend Moon Ik-hwan, one of the dozens of opponents of the Chun regime, who has been put under house arrest during the Reagan visit. While there has been some progress recently, there is still a human rights problem in Korea, with charges that dissidents are jailed or tortured. Korea's leading dissident, Kim Young-sam, says Mr. Reagan should have been more outspoken about human rights.
여러 가지 의미를 부여하는 것 같기도 하지만은
On the subject of democracy, liberty, and human rights, there was a lot lacking in the speech. Many Koreans watched it on TV, and they'll be very disappointed.
But the president prefers to discuss these subjects in private and was expected to bring them up with Chun. Mr. Reagan did meet with a group of Koreans that included some dissidents and said he supports a move toward democracy. Aide said the president had come to listen, but after fewer than 5 minutes of handshaking, he left, heading for a state dinner with President Chun.
In the Middle East, Syria claims American F-14 fighters have been buzzing its positions in Lebanon and Syria, and also says it has fired at the planes. The U.S. has been slow to confirm air activity in the area, but the Navy has admitted it lost one plane. NBC News correspondent Fred Francis has learned more.
The largest American war fleet since Vietnam is now off the coast of Lebanon. And today, NBC News learned that that fleet has lost its second $30 million jet fighter in the past 5 days. 2 American pilots have been rescued, but 2 others are presumed dead. The Navy announced last Tuesday that one of its F-14 Tomcats went down on a training mission. But NBC News learned from a Pentagon insider that, in fact, 2 F-14 Tomcats collided at that time while taking evasive action to avoid Syrian anti-aircraft fire. The Syrians say they fired on U.S. warplanes on Thursday. Only after NBC News asked the Pentagon to confirm or deny the collision report did a spokesman reveal that a second fighter had gone down. Both were from the carrier Kennedy. The Pentagon denies the collision report. 3 aircraft carriers, the Kennedy, the Independence, and the Eisenhower, are part of the 30-ship battle fleet with 300 aircraft. Speculation is high in Washington that the fleet will be used to retaliate against those who killed the American servicemen at the Beirut airport last month. The most likely target for retaliation is the town of Baalbek, 35 miles northeast of Beirut, a Lebanese town well within Syrian-held territory. In Baalbek, there are 1,500 Iranian Revolutionary Guards, along with a few hundred radical Lebanese Shiites, who intelligence sources say were behind the bombing of the Marines. But how to strike at them is the tactical problem. The Iranians and the Lebanese Shiites are living among civilians. A ground attack using the 1,800 American Marines on board the carrier Independence is one possibility. In Washington, military expert Edward Ludwak says a commando raid is the most workable option.
It's a high-risk operation, but it has two advantages. First, sometimes you do particularly want to go after the specific individuals who did something. And this may be one of the situations, and then the commando raid is the way to do it. If you send aircraft who just bomb, you know, you're going to hit some of them and some civilians, and maybe all civilians and so on.
Because any attack from the ground or the air could result in high United States and civilian casualties, the president may decide that revenge in Lebanon is too costly. Fred Francis, NBC News, Washington.
About 400 demonstrators gathered in downtown Portland today to voice their disapproval of the Reagan administration policies in Central America and the Caribbean. Most of the speakers were skeptical of administration claims that the invasion of Grenada was a move to ensure the safety of American medical students. Elsewhere, about 100 Portland area people got together today to pray for peace. They represented a number of religious faiths, including Catholic, Jewish, Quaker, and Protestant. They listened to discussions, watched films, and listened to poetry.
On nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity.
The event was sponsored by the Archdiocese of Portland and the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. Well, those praying for life without more Mount St. Helens flooding may be getting a bill. The story and weather next. Washington taxpayers may have to come up with as much as $100 million to help pay for flood control around Mount St. Helens. The Corps of Engineers has come up with a plan to control runoff from the devastated area, but they want the people affected to help pay. Corps engineers recommend an underground steel pipe to drain water from Spirit Lake. They would also like to build 3 dams on the Toutle River to hold back volcanic sediment. A Cowlitz County commissioner says even if they borrowed the maximum the state allows, they couldn't raise enough money to pay their share. Commissioner Vern Youngquist also says Oregon, Idaho, and Montana would also benefit from the flood control project and should be asked to help pay the bill. Well, it's apparently going to be another wet day tomorrow for most of us. On the coast, rain is expected in the morning, turning to showers later in the day. The high should be in the low 50s and the low near 40. Winds gusting up to 40 miles an hour are also expected. In the Cascades, snow tomorrow, heavy at times. The snow level should be about 4,000 feet. In east central Oregon, occasional showers of rain or snow. The high should be about 45 degrees, the low between 20 and 25. And in the Portland-Vancouver area, rain turning to showers tomorrow, and the high should be near 50 degrees, the low between 40 and 45. Well, today's rain and mud made it a perfect day to introduce a boy to American football. Sheriff's deputies from Clackamas and Marion counties slid their way through a flag football game at Clackamas High School. The effort was for 7-year-old Justin Moskowitz. The boy has a rare form of cancer. He's visiting Portland on his way to Southern California for a bone marrow transplant. That transplant is going to cost money, a lot of money. The sheriff deputies have already raised $13,000. They need $100,000. The Blazers and Oregon State played games tonight. Dave Sullivan has the results and details on an important volleyball game coming up on News 8 tonight. A lot of sports news tonight. Dave, what happened to Oregon State?
They've had a tough time every time they go down to Arizona. It happened again tonight. Not the best of nights for Oregon State. The Beavers just never got their offense on track tonight in falling to Arizona State 38-3. The Beavers got a field goal in the first quarter and never scored after that, as ASU scored from all angles, including a blocked punt. Oregon State slips to 1-6 in conference and can look forward to playing Oregon next week in Eugene. Now, the Ducks prepared today for the Civil War with a 16-7 win over Stanford. Paul Schwabe had a day he won't forget with 3 field goals, including a 51-yarder. Oregon's lone touchdown came on a short pass from freshman quarterback Chris Miller to Doug Herman. Miller went the distance today. Now Oregon's defense helped the cause with 3 interceptions. And the big news today in the Pac-10, UCLA lost to Arizona and Washington beat Southern Cal. So that means Washington will go to the Rose Bowl if it can beat Washington State next weekend. The Huskies rolled past the Trojans 24-0 today, thanks in part to Danny Green. Watch the moves on this play and realize there's no time left in the first half when he scores on the pass from Steve Pallor. Beautiful moves. Green broke it open in the third period, returning a punt 71 yards for a touchdown. Washington is now 5-1 in the Pac-10, while UCLA slipped to 5-1-1. Now, Husky fans will remember that the Cougars denied them a trip to the Rose Bowl last year with a Washington State victory. And it's no cinch this year for Washington. The Cougars are on a roll. A back and forth between Arizona and UCLA today. The Wildcats scored the winning touchdown in the last minute. Tom Tunnicliffe to Jay Dobbins. The Bruins could have tied it, but John Lee missed a 37-yard field goal with 3 seconds left. Looking at the scores today involving top 10 teams, Nebraska rolls over Kansas 67-13. Texas is struggling but remains unbeaten. Auburn is headed to the Sugar Bowl after its win over 4th-ranked Georgia, and Illinois is preparing for the Rose Bowl, while Miami of Florida beat Florida State by just 1. Number 7 Southern Methodist routed Texas Tech. Brigham Young beat Colorado State, and Michigan wiped out Minnesota. Number 10 Ohio State did the same to Northwestern. Again, in Pac-10 games, Washington shut out Southern Cal, and Oregon State lost to Arizona State. The Ducks beat Stanford, while Washington State took California. It was the end of an era today at Palatine Hill for the Lewis and Clark Willamette contest. The homestanding Pioneers didn't disappoint. Retiring coach Fred Wilson, Steve Oakley to Dave Grill. That's all Lewis and Clark needed as they won 9-6. But the crowd braved the nasty weather more for a tribute to Wilson, who closed out his career today after 19 years as head coach. The 57-year-old Wilson is actually in his 26th year of coaching service at L&C. The Pioneers ended any hopes of a Willamette comeback with an interception near the end. Lewis and Clark finished the year just 4-5, but that didn't take anything away from the outpouring of emotion today as Wilson was carried off the field for the last time.
Everybody says you always remember your last one. We're going to remember this year a lot because we had great attitude and a lot of great players. But there's other things in the future. But it was a great, great day.
Are you going to miss it much?
Well, you know, I've never done anything but look ahead. So if I don't look, I don't think I'll miss it. I'm sure that I'll miss some relationships with players, but got to look ahead.
Good luck to Fred Wilson. Again, it's Lewis and Clark finishing the year with that 9-0 win over Willamette, while Linfield and Whit were tied at 7. Tonight, Portland State fell to Cal Poly. Pacific Lutheran beat Pacific, so PL is the Northwest Conference champion, and Southern Oregon routed Eastern Oregon 47-14 today. The Portland Trailblazers ran into the high-scoring Utah Jazz tonight and came away with a loss to the Jazz. The final there was 136-122. Utah, the highest-scoring team in the league, jumped out to a 16-point lead after the first quarter and never looked back. Adrian Dantley hurt the Blazers again with 34 points, while Ricky Green added 22 along with 13 assists. Now, Jim Paxson had 33 for Portland tonight, while Kenny Carr added 21. The Blazers now 6-3 host Atlanta tomorrow night at the Coliseum. Again, it's the Blazers falling to Utah 136-122, while Golden State beat Cleveland. San Antonio beat Denver 126-107, and Ralph Sampson earned his money tonight, hitting 2 free throws with 1 second left as Houston edged Dallas. Boston took Chicago, and Indiana beat New Jersey by 10, and Kelly Tripucka had 33 as Detroit beat Kansas City. The Portland Winterhawks have lost 3 in a row, but tonight's 6-4 loss to Victoria hurt more than the most. After falling to Victoria last night, Portland looked like it was ready to change it tonight. Alfie Turcotte put Portland ahead 2-0. But in the third period, Victoria took control, tying it and then going ahead on Richard Hodgdew's goal. Suddenly it was 4-3 Victoria. Randy Heath pulled Portland back even at 4-4 on the assist from Sasser. There's still a chance for Portland. But just 30 seconds later, it's Hodgdew again for Victoria, much to the disappointment of the more than 8,000 fans at the Coliseum. Victoria added an open net goal at the buzzer for the final 6-4 win. Portland slips to third in the West and has 2 days off before hosting Calgary on Wednesday. Now, there were all kinds of state high school finals going on today, including the volleyball championship, and there was no lack of excitement tonight as Corvallis beat Barlow in 2 sets, 15-12 and 15-10 to take home top honors. Earlier in the day, Barlow upset defending state champion St. Mary's of Portland, while Corvallis edged Marshfield in 3 very close sets. Marshfield beat David Douglas for 3rd place, and here's the match point for Corvallis.
A lot of hard work. I mean, 3-hour practices a day and weights, you know, and it's just incredible.
In Double-A volleyball, LaSalle beat Phoenix for the title, and Neocani is the Single-A champion, beating Pine Eagle today. In soccer action, Warner Pacific gave it everything it had against powerhouse Simon Fraser, and they nearly came away with the upset of the year. Simon Fraser, currently ranked 2nd in the nation, jumped out to a 1-0 lead on a penalty kick, but Warner Pacific tied it on Mel Gristle's goal off the assist from Brent Goulet. It was rather like David against Goliath, but Warner Pacific proved itself up to the task, even though they ended up losing to Simon Fraser 2-1 in double overtime. A fine year for Warner Pacific, just missing a trip to nationals. There was another major upset today in the state soccer semifinals as Mount Hood champion Centennial upset the state's #1 team and defending state champion Lake Ridge 1-0. That's the first loss of the year for Lake Ridge. Centennial got a sterling effort from goalie Todd Strobeck, who stopped numerous Lake Ridge opportunities. And in the other semifinal tonight, Lincoln beat Parkrose also 1-0. Meanwhile, on the girls' side, Lake Ridge was also the defending state champion, but they lost to Beaverton in a shootout today 2-1, and Reynolds beat Wilson 3-0. So it will be Beaverton against Reynolds for the state title. That will be decided on Wednesday. And the state gymnastics championship also finished up today. Parkrose took the team title, followed by South Eugene and Crescent Valley. All-around winner was Julianne Brombaugh of Clackamas, while Margaret Schmidt of Wilson was 2nd. And a couple of final notes. For the 2nd year in a row, the Warner Pacific volleyball team won the National Christian College Championship. Coach Terry Thomas has been named the Coach of the Year. And the Oregon cross-country team swept to the regional championship today in Eugene. The Ducks' Jim Hill took first, while Kathy Hayes did the same for the Lady Ducks. And one final note, high school football playoffs today. Bellarmine beat Fort Vancouver 21-10. So a very busy day in sports, and we look forward to the NFL tomorrow.
Sure, and rah for the Ducks. Thank you very much.
You bet. Oregon State next weekend.
Oh, okay. Remember the Beatniks? Well, Allen Ginsberg does. Lou Frederick talked to him today and has a report next. Allen Ginsberg is in Portland tonight. 15 years ago, people thought he was, well, a little different. He's still trying to prove they were right. Lou Frederick spent some time with the poet-philosopher today.
Does this man look like your typical new wave rocker? Well, that's just one of his incarnations. He says that it just depends on your age, not his. You may know him as a poet you studied in school, a leader of the beatnik generation of the 50s, one of the merry pranksters, or a leader in this country's Buddhist organization.
I haven't had much to do yet with Wall Street. I'm hoping to die at the age of 95, the head of the Securities Exchange Commission.
He is also known as an outspoken critic of militarism.
I don't think there will be a nuclear catastrophe. It's sanity. People don't want to commit suicide and they don't want to bomb their mothers. So that means everybody is up against the wall of sanity. And they all have to figure out how to live on the planet rather than how to blow it up, which was what the left and the new consciousness movement and the New Age movement has been cultivating for some time.
Ginsberg feels that meditation will serve as one answer, but he is also moving into music once again.
Here's a hypocrisy is the key to self-fulfilling prophecy. Hypocrisy is the key to self-fulfilling prophecy. You can get much.
Well, Allen Ginsberg played tonight at Reed College. We were just noticing his wardrobe, button-down collar
tie.
and a new wave tie. That's pretty remarkable.
I'd trade him.
You look pretty good at it. Thanks. Anyway, we'll be back again tomorrow. Hope you can join us then. Good night.
Good night.